Good morning, everyone. Looks like we have a pretty healthy crowd of folks joining us today. We're going to give maybe 30 more seconds for any latecomers to sign in, and then we'll go ahead and get things started. But really want to thank you all for joining us this morning. All right. And we sometimes love to encourage folks to just share who's with us today. If you'd like to do that, we'd be more than happy to have you drop your name and maybe what city or town you're with and your role. So feel free to drop that into, I think we've got a chat feature there, so that'd be great. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get things started? So again, thank you for joining us today for our second webinar in a series of two. Today, we're going to be focused on affordability strategies. On the next slide, you'll see that I'm Eugene Howard. I am kicking things off, but I'm also joined by my colleagues Mark Williams and Kyle Soner, who are also going to be presenting today. In today's agenda, we've done a couple of quick introductions. We are going to go over the affordability strategies and how they relate to House Bill 24-1313 and Senate Bill 24-174. We'll share some of the elements that are contained in the directory, the strategies directory. We'll give a couple of examples of how these strategies have been used and implemented to kind of just spark some ideas or some thought. We'll share a little bit with you about funding opportunities that are available to help support this work. And then we'll close with any questions from the audience that might be out there. But before we do that, we do want to start with some announcements. We've got quite a few things on the slate. First and foremost, we have published our draft Vital Landscapes and Resources report. That report is open and available for review and comment. And so we encourage anyone that's curious about what's contained in that report or has a community that looks like and feels like vital landscapes, we would encourage you to take a look at the report and provide any comments. We are taking comments through close of business tomorrow. In addition to that, we have our transit-oriented communities infrastructure pilot grant program up and running. So this is an opportunity for communities that are subject to the transit-oriented communities law who feel as if they could achieve early certification, like really early, as in the next few months, and are interested in this infrastructure grant program. We have been having some conversations with different jurisdictions, and if you have not met with us, but you are curious to learn more about this opportunity, we are taking meeting requests and having conversations. Now, the official grant application program or application is open. We opened that grant opportunity on October 27th, and it will be remaining open through December 12th, close of business, which is a Friday. Now, for anyone that is really thinking that they are ready to go as far as applying for this pilot round, one of the requirements is having a pre-application meeting. So again, I mentioned we've had a couple of those already, so really excited to see some early interest. But again, if you are a community or within a community that's looking at this or considering it, but maybe want to know more about it, definitely reach out to us and we can share more information about the program itself. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of this presentation today. We also have our housing planning grant third round open. That opened on November 7th and will remain open through December 3rd. So there's a little bit of time left on that one if you're interested. And we will have an informational webinar later this afternoon at 1 o'clock. So if you are curious and want to know more, feel free to join us at 1 o'clock today. We have been meeting with communities that have been interested in understanding more about the Neighborhood Centers program. And so we have been meeting with folks, talking with different communities. We did have an earlier deadline, but because of the interest and wanting to make sure communities had plenty of time to explore this opportunity, we did extend that deadline. So if you were thinking about it earlier and maybe are still in conversations internally, do know that you have until November 21st to express your interest if you're thinking about applying for that pilot centers, neighborhood centers designation route. And then we've got our strategic growth report published. So definitely encourage folks to take a look at that. That can be found online on our website. And then we've got our housing strategies peer exchange webinar coming up on November 20th at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the topic of that webinar will be middle income housing tax credits. So hopefully there's quite a few things on our slate and hopefully things that are of interest to you are here, and we look forward to seeing you at some of these other opportunities. So those were announcements. Now let's get to the main event, and that is our affordability strategies work for today. So really, this is coming out of some work that we have been working with our consultant teams on. Many of you have been advising and guiding us through this process over the last several months. And so we did put together a guidance document. We've got this full directory of all the different strategies, which we're going to cover at a higher level today. So definitely, if this is of interest to you and your community, we encourage you to take a look at the actual printed or published document. There's a lot of information in there and a lot of helpful resources. So definitely encourage you to take a look at that document. This, as I mentioned earlier, is the second of two webinars. We did have a displacement mitigation risk strategies webinar a few weeks ago. We do have that recorded and is available online. And so this is the second in that series. So uh, moving on, why do you need to know this? Well, for those of you who are subject to 174, our affordable housing planning and transit-oriented communities, 1313, these are requirements to be in full compliance with those two pieces of legislation. So they're required. But the good news is, while each law, and if you're a community that has both of these laws applying to you, some of the benefits to this is that not all, but many of these strategies can count for both laws. So pretty excited about that. We felt that building in that flexibility would help communities really look at the menu of options, choose the one that is best suited for their community, and instead of having to look at a variety to be in compliance, we felt that there could be advantages and benefits to allowing certain strategies to apply to both laws. Now that's not 100%, and I'll get to an example of that here in a second. And a compliance looks like picking amongst longer term and shorter term more standard strategies. So we are asking communities to look through and select at least two from the standard strategies list, and then at least one from the long-term strategies. So those are sort of the base requirements. Of course, you can do more, or if you see opportunities within these strategies that really look like and reflect your community, we would absolutely love to see folks take advantage of as many of these as makes sense for your community. But so those are the categories that the laws sort of speak to. Now, I just mentioned a second ago that not all strategies can work across the laws. One example of an exception is with our expedited approvals strategy, really moving things through the process to streamline the time required. So if you are a community that is also taking advantage of Proposition 123, Proposition 123, one of the key elements to be a Prop 123 community is having that expedited review process. So if you are a community taking advantage of Proposition 123 and you have or are in the process of implementing this expedited review, unfortunately, that particular strategy becomes unavailable to you for 1313 and 174 because it's a requirement of Proposition 1/23. So a little confusing there. Reach out if you have more questions, and we can certainly go into more detail with you. But that's just one example of where, because of one piece of legislation and on a program, kind of takes that one particular item sort of out of the mix. Uh, Thinking about our housing action plans, I'm going to turn things over to Mark to speak a little bit more about that law and these strategies and how they work within housing planning. So, Mark,
Yeah.
take it away.
Thanks, Eugene. We're going to popcorn around just a little bit as we focus on our laws and programs that we specialize in this webinar. So, for housing action plans, you have to respond to demonstrated housing needs, and those housing needs are demonstrated through the housing needs assessment. So, if you do an HNA, chances are you also do an HAP, but or housing action plan. Although not everyone who does an HNA will be required to do a housing action plan, and you can see the criteria for the housing action plans down here. It's a little bit more relaxed than it is for the HNA. If you have any questions or doubts whether or not you need to do a housing action plan, we have a great tool you can look at. It's called the Multi-Law Applicability Web App, and it's a spreadsheet form and a map form. So, for example, you can go to the map and click on your jurisdiction, and there'll be a pop-up that shows which of the laws your place is subject to. And then don't forget that the HAP is due by January 1st, 2028. Usually these things are due on December the 31st of whatever year, but the General Assembly is keeping us on our toes by changing that one particular date to January the 1st. So I'm going to hand it off to Kyle Soner right now.
Mark, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for starting your day with us. My name is Kyle Soner, a research and data analyst on the technical assistance team here in the Community Development Office. And primarily my role at DOLA has been assisting in the implementation of House Bill 1313, where we see these affordability strategies mentioned and used again. And really it's to, increase the availability and preservation of this affordable housing around transit. And it's written directly into the bill or the law, some of the goals, of these affordability strategies, and kind of the fact that they're meant to complement transit-oriented development, in the sense that, you can't have a truly successful TOC without affordability reaching, these different income levels for housing. And so the law does state that these need to be based on the demonstrated housing needs within your transit-oriented community. And you viewing this, you here are the experts in your community. So, you really do know what is best. And, we encourage you to really take a look at that if you're still working on deciding which of these strategies will work. And then these are, supposed to be reported within the final housing opportunity goal report, but they are not due for implementation technically until the December 31st, 2026 finalization date. We just ask that if these strategies haven't been implemented, there's a section in there where you include an implementation plan, essentially what you're going to do to get things up and running. And so without further ado, we will move into these strategies. And as Eugene and Mark said, we have both standard and long-term strategies. The standard strategies that you'll see are, they're more foundational. They may be programs, often shorter term, but, can produce sort of these quicker results. Whereas the long-term strategies are a bit more extended. They may include phasing and complex, decisions to really get them up and running. But we have found that they do pay dividends 5-10 years down the line once things get really well implemented and used in your community. And so we'll start off with the standard affordability strategies. As much as I know you would love to hear me walk through each of these for the next 4 hours, I will try to keep this short. One thing I want to direct your attention to is strategy 1E. That is that prioritization of expedited development approvals. That's that pairing that won't work with the Prop 123 commitment because you're essentially doing the same thing. Next, we have 1F through 1J. And one thing I did want to point out here is that 1H, reducing local parking requirements, is ineligible for House Bill 1313 because those subject jurisdictions do overlap with that House Bill 1304 minimum parking law. Onto the long-term affordability strategies. Again, all things that you've probably seen before. One of these restrictions that comes up with 1313 is that allowance of ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, etc. And that restriction exists because it's quite probable that if in these designated transit centers you will be allowing these types of housing, and so the law asks that this allowance expands beyond the transit centers to more than just the zoning in your transit centers. Again, we see a restriction here with 2E, that administrative approval process that is also required within transit centers for parcels 5 acres or less. And so again, the law asks that that allowance be expanded beyond the transit center boundary to really make an impact and count toward a long-term affordability strategy. And finally, as I said before, you are the experts in your community. You know what works best. You may have strategies that you've been considering, and this is good. This is a good time to get those up and running. And so both laws do allow for this flexibility to use these optional strategies to essentially build your own. The only thing that we ask is that you reach out to us if you're unsure, and we would be happy to talk through it. We have some questions listed here at the bottom of the page, about what is the impact, what is the responsiveness, and is there documentation or guidance to kind of bolster and provide some teeth to this strategy. So if you do have any questions about those, please reach out to Mark, myself, Eugene, or anybody else on the team. And with that, I will pass it back over to Mark to talk about the fantastic directory that we.
Yeah, like Kyle said, we're going to take a look in the directory. We'll just call it the directory because the formal title is a short story unto itself. But as with all of our guidance documents, it's pretty long, and that's by necessity. These laws have some complexity, but this one's a little bit different. It does have some introductory material up front, and you can see that over on the left-hand side of the slide with the bulleted points. So why are different things? Why are they strategies? Why choose it? Where has it been successful? And then we have resources and implementation guidance. So that sort of lays the groundwork. And then each of the strategies that Kyle was going through is sort of a mini chapter unto itself. And so if you're not interested in a certain strategy, you can skip to the next one, and you don't have to read the whole 88 pages unless you really want to. Next slide. So these strategies are part of the Housing Action Plan, like I mentioned earlier, and they help implement the housing needs assessment, which is where the detailed analysis of housing need comes into place. So what we do is think of the H&A as step 1, and then the Housing Action Plan is step 2 of what you'll need to do. And you can see that there's some other key steps listed down here in the housing action planning process. So reviewing existing strategies, identify housing goals that in your H&A show that they need priority action, looking at timelines considering local context and constraints. And then also, this is an important step not to forget as you're setting up your housing action plan is the progress report. So in the statute, every 3 years, you're required to do uh, an update to DOLA showing progress on the strategies, not just this, but anything that's in your housing action plan. And so what you choose to do in the housing action plan is up to you. But once you commit to it, then we do review that for 3 years, and then your housing action, or yeah, your housing action plan is good for a total of 6 years. So please keep that in mind. Next slide. These strategies are optional. You're not required to pick any one in particular. It's whichever one your community thinks is going to help you do the best to create affordable housing. So it probably is a good idea, though, to develop some criteria about which ones you do want to select. And we've got sample selection criteria for your community to consider. Administrative effort. This could be really important for smaller places that need to do a housing action plan. Many of these places that are required to do HAPs are smaller, and so they have more limited staff. And so there's a greater impact on the staff that is there. One thing is kind of the bottom line. What is the potential impact on housing affordability? You know your communities better than we do. So based on the list of strategies that are required, what do you think would make the most impact? And keep in mind that there are a list of strategies, but there's also an option to come up with your own strategy if you think that would work better than anything you see in the document. You do need to have a meeting with us or show that potential strategy to DOLA for us to discuss, but there's certainly a lot of room for creativity and local knowledge to be used to full effect as you implement your housing action plan. So you can, I don't need to read the rest of the bullets, but I think one thing to keep in the back of your mind also is just what your local housing market is like, because obviously you know it best. So do you need apartments? Do you need what income level or what part of your city or town or county would those be best suited for? Next slide. So some more important considerations as you develop these affordability strategies. Ask DOLA if, to see if the action in question would qualify as a required strategy. So that's if you already have something maybe that you're doing and you could continue doing that. And that's something that we could take a look at. Look for complementary opportunities. We don't want to silo what you're doing if there's an opportunity to leverage something else that you're already working on, or maybe something that a neighboring community is working on. So maybe something to do with a housing authority or some kind of multi-jurisdictional funding effort. Those are things that can be considered. Is this approach sustainable over time? These planning efforts are just getting started in Colorado, so we want to do things that will be sustainable over the long term. So they're not just project related, but more program related. And that's how you maximize the impact. And then lastly, we all know planning is very political, and all this exists in a political environment. And so if there are more flexible options that you want to discuss, we certainly understand that. And think at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Eugene.
All right, thank you, Mark. Now we're going to give a few examples. Hopefully by now you've been listening, you've seen what some of the strategies are. Hopefully you're thinking about what might work in your community with your residents. And so let's take a look at a couple of examples. The first one being leveraging publicly owned land. So this strategy would suggest or recommend that if your community does not already have a process in place to use or leverage publicly owned land, to maybe think about adopting a law or policy for that purpose. Wait, why or what is this strategy? And I think some of this is pretty self-evident. At least I hope so. Publicly owned land offers opportunities for that local community to have control over the land that it owns and really putting it and maximizing the desired outcome. And in this case, we're really focused on affordable housing. So having land in your control that you then can have additional elements or requirements on top of what zoning might also ask for really is just a great opportunity to really think about leveraging what you already own and reducing some of the friction as it relates to development because you are the owner of the land. And again, as the standard strategy suggests, this can really help ensure communities have not only housing options and housing choice, but long-term affordability, particularly focused on our lower income and senior residents. And why choose this strategy? Well, I think it's kind of obvious again, but many of our communities are landlocked. So the available or availability of land might be constrained. So again, leveraging what is in your control. And again, reducing some of the elements or requirements because you are the owner and therefore in control of what happens with the property. Uh, in many cases, the public sector is the owner of large parcels that maybe are just sort of waiting for their next iteration. And this could be an opportunity to leverage these large parcels for housing development. And then you, as a public sector owner, can really work with and negotiate with developers. Maybe you offer the land at a discount, or maybe at a long-term lease. But again, it's the flexibility that's built into owning the land and therefore having requirements on how that land gets used. And again, in the production and in the service of affordable housing development. And where has this been done? One example of two that we're going to share today is the city of Fort Collins. Now, and most of you are already saying, hey, we've been doing this work for decades. And that is absolutely true. And as Mark mentioned a moment ago, if you, and I think Kyle as well, if you have strategies that you've been working and employing in your community, and you don't maybe quite see it reflected in the way that you're doing it in your community amongst those options within the directory, let us know. We are always open to learning and understanding and sharing best practices from around the state. So, absolutely encourage you to share with us what's working in your community, much like Fort Collins has been doing for the better part of 25 years. So they've been land banking and really trying to leverage their publicly owned parcels for specific target area median income target levels. So rentals at 60% AMI and ownership at 80% AMI. And because they control the land and therefore can have these additional requirements on it, allows them to really incentivize that outcome. They have their own affordable housing fund that they use to acquire land. And the little box here in blue shares some of the outcomes that they've experienced because of their program. 54 for sale townhomes, really working with the IHOA grant program and community land trusts. So again, a lot of different elements that all work together in the service of affordable housing development. Another example is the city of Craig. So our larger cities and our smaller communities are all able to leverage these strategies and adopt them and mold them in the way that fits their community. And Craig is a great example of that. They leverage some of their affordable housing, or excuse me, some of their publicly owned land for affordable housing, including a property adjacent to a park, existing utilities, trails and other public amenities. So again, creating a holistic area, not just focused on any one piece of it, but they were able to leverage their land and really help it contribute to the overall community. And 96 rental units are the outcome of this kind of approach. And so, again, we try to provide as much guidance and examples and resources as we can. So, no different with this standard strategy. We've got a handful of resources that once these slides are shared with you all, you'll have access to these links. So, I'm not going to go into great detail in the interest of time, but do know that we've got some great implementation recommendations, guidance, and resources for you. And now I will turn things over to Mark to talk about a long-term strategy example.
Thanks, Eugene. So this is one that we talked about earlier. It doesn't really work with Prop 123, but it's such an interesting approach. I wanted to focus on it, and that's to use administrative processes for housing approvals in lieu of public hearing requirements. So this is something that you can do in the Housing Action Plan. For transit-oriented communities, it's not specifically allowed, but if you have something that's similar in approach, um, it's something that we could talk about allowing for TOCs. And you might need to approach your or change your approach a little bit in your TOC planning. So what is a strategy? It's an administrative review that is for non-discretionary evaluation by the planning staff as opposed to elected or appointed officials. The benefits are that it's faster and has a less complex review process, which is especially beneficial for affordable housing where development margins are tighter, financing timelines can be tighter, and there's just not, generally speaking, as much flexibility for doing affordable housing projects as for market rate housing. And then obviously eliminating procedural steps cuts time for the review and then getting to the construction. And then developers always like more certainty in their approval processes. So this sort of reiterates what was in the last slide, but I really wanted to highlight the finding on the right side of the screen. This is a study that was done by the National Multifamily Housing Council and the National Association of Home Builders 3 years ago, which found that projects that were impacted by NIMBYs, and we all know what that is, adds on average 5.6% of the total development cost and delays projects by about 7.5 months. So that's a big reason why having as much go through non-discretionary review as possible is beneficial for affordable housing projects. Next slide, please. I found a couple of interesting perspectives on the benefits of non-discretionary review. I think these are fairly mainstream publications and certainly respected. The Harvard Law Review was that public hearings generally oversample from the portion of the community that benefits most from measures that preserve property values at the expense of increasing the supply of affordable housing. And then from Governing Magazine, neighborhood participation in the housing permitting process makes existing political inequalities worse, limits housing supply, and contributes to the affordability crisis. And so this is all not to say that we don't want you to have public hearings. This is just one option of many that is possible. If you are going to choose this option, it's beneficial. We're not saying this is required or recommending that you do this, but if your development and zoning codes, your comp plans, any supplemental design standards are up to date as opposed to 20, 25 years old, that's a good thing if you're talking about curtailing the public input process because the public does have an opportunity to participate in updating all those documents. And if it's happened recently, then that's something you can always lean on is we had a public participation process. These are the zoning standards that we came up with. This all went through public hearings. And so it just tightens that whole process up a little bit. Cool. Yeah, and then I think sorry, could you go back? Point. One of the benefits of non-discretionary review is that planners do put a lot of work and effort into coming up with these standards, but If you're a planning commissioner or a counselor or county commissioner, it's hard to think objectively when you have a room full of angry people, and emotion can often trump those carefully laid plans. All right, next slide. So a couple examples of where this has already been done in Colorado, and this is not really a huge impact for what Longmont has done. It's actually a step in the right, and so maybe this is a template for how other places who maybe want to start a little bit smaller and then build up as they see how the process of having non-discretionary review benefits their community and how it works. But in Longmont, they allow subdivisions creating 4+ lots to bypass the preliminary plat review in public hearing if it has a certain amount of on-site affordable housing. And so definitely beneficial. And I think that's a good model for other places to at least consider. And then in Erie, they passed an ordinance a couple of years ago in their development code, which allows affordable housing projects to be approved by the planning director using the administrative site plan approval process. And I think I have one more slide. I don't. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Kyle.
Thank you, Mark. And now for everyone's favorite topic, where's the money? And so we have some funding opportunities and resources for you, just to kind of guide your assessments and provide assistance when you're working through these processes of getting these strategies implemented. First up being the Housing Planning Grant Program, or H-Plan. And this is really directly tied to all of these elements that are necessary for communities involved with Senate Bill 24-174. As Eugene mentioned, the third funding cycle is open and closes on Wednesday, December 3rd. Again, if you would like to register for the informational session this afternoon at 1 p.m., there is a link here or on the H-Plan homepage on the DOLA website. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Ashley Basham, our program manager. And because we have already completed 2 rounds of this, we have some data from that and insights. Mainly what we wanted you to take away from this slide is that revising your housing action plan saves money and it saves time. So it's just more efficient, it's more effective. And so being able to save a few months and a couple $1,000s looks really good to your city council or your housing board. Mark, is there anything else that you'd like to add here?
I think you're good.
Yeah, I think the only thing to add is if you are a subject community to any of the housing planning requirements, definitely, if you haven't started, we definitely want to encourage folks to work that into your schedules as much as you can, because we're in November of 2025, but December of 2026 will be here before we know it. So definitely want to encourage folks to think about beginning this process earlier if they haven't done so already.
And speaking of December 2026, that is when the final housing opportunity goal report is due. But for some of those communities that are prepared to gain an early certification, we have the Transit Oriented Communities Infrastructure Grant, or TOSI, TOKI, however you want to call it. That pilot round is open and closes on December 12th. Those projects must be in transit centers or designated neighborhood centers within certified transit-oriented communities. Again, we have an entire page dedicated to this on our grants page. A pre-application meeting with our grants team is necessary in order to apply for this pilot round. And we've over the past couple of weeks we've had a lot of great meetings and gotten to see just exactly what communities are intending this grant money to go towards. And it's really awesome to see all of the different projects that folks are bringing to the table. And finally, we have the Local Planning Capacity Grant Program. Try saying that 10 times fast. We like to call it LPC. And this is really to bolster those communities that are engaging in the Prop 123 fast track requirements. And so in spring of 2026, we will have the next funding round open. That is January 26th through February 26th of 2026. Again, there's an informational session, or reach out to our program manager, Robin DeFalco, and she can direct you toward any information that you may need. And I believe with that, I will pass it back to Eugene to close this out.
All right, thanks, Kyle. And I love for LPC all those 26 dates. Hopefully, it'll make it a little bit easier to remember January and February milestones. All right, so we have a number of resources. Hopefully, in addition to some of the key strategies and some of the high-level takeaways, you take away that we've got resources. So we encourage folks to take a look at the different items that we've produced, worked with others to produce to help facilitate the desired outcomes in working with all of you. There's a long list here. I really won't go through all of this because I do want to make sure we have time to entertain any questions you all have out there. But do know that we intend to send the slide deck out, and everything that you see in blue underlines are hot links to those resources. And of course, if you can't find something, always feel free to reach out to us. And so on the next slide, you'll see our contact information. So for the three of us that you've heard from today, as well as Ashley Basham, who has been mentioned as the key contact person for our grant programs. So definitely encourage you all, if you haven't done so or don't know Ashley yet, but you are interested in learning more, to definitely capture this and reach out to her. And she will marshal all the right folks to join her if need be in any conversation. So with that, I think we can go ahead and see if there are any questions. So uh, thank you for hanging in there with us for this 45 minutes or so. Hopefully you heard a few things that were attractive to you in your communities. But if you have any questions, let's take a few minutes and field those. So I'll open up my chat to see if there's any questions in there. Thank you to those of you who have been putting out resources and links. I appreciate that. Let's see here. Housing production is not affected. So Drew, I'm looking at Drew's question here. Has DOLA monitored the implementation details of IZ? And I'm assuming that's inclusionary zoning at the local level. Yeah, there. And what parameters are being used to ensure housing production is not affected? Not sure if I fully understand your question, Drew. I'm not sure if you're able to perhaps come off mute to elaborate. And I'm going to see if I can help you with that in case you need permissions for that. There's Drew. All right. I think I have given you the ability to speak if you'd like to,
Oh,
Drew.
can you hear, can you hear me? Cool.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so there's just been a lot of research on inclusionary zoning, and I know some of the details for what locals are contemplating. It depends on their local market. But I'm just wondering how DOLA has consulted with local governments and how you are going about as like a baseline of percentage of units, the AMI levels that are expected, and then making sure that it's not hurting overall housing production in the jurisdiction.
Mhm. All right. That's a great question. There's a lot in that question. I may want to take your contact information and maybe follow up with you. I want to make sure to really truly reach out to others that may have a bit more background on your question. So if that's okay, I don't like to usually, punt, but I also want to make sure I give you a really good response to that question. So I do appreciate you bringing that to our attention and bringing that up today. If that's okay with you, can I
Yeah,
follow
that's
up with
perfectly
you?
fine.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that. Let's see here. I see a hand. All sorts of fun things going on today. I'm not sure who that was, but if that person can speak, feel free to do so.
It was me, Mark.
Oh,
I thought I would verbally respond to Max, who had a question about some of the citations I used when talking about non-discretionary hearings. Those were not in the guidance documents, but I found them as I was preparing this slide deck. If you want a copy of those, just email me from I think the slide before this had my email. Well, it's mark.l.williams@state.co.us. That's all.
thank you, Mark.
Mark, I will keep you on the line. We have a housing needs assessment question. Is the housing needs assessment due by 12/31/26, but the housing action plan isn't due until January 1st of 2028? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So you've got a year and a day, and it's not a leap year. So yeah, just 366 days. But the reason for that is the statute is written so that the housing action plans, and I don't know, I remember it verbatim, but they are supposed to respond to accepted or approved housing needs assessments. And so I think the thought process is you develop your housing needs assessment and identify what your community needs in terms of, or identify where the needs are, and then start thinking about what you need. And then you develop the housing action plan. So that doesn't mean that you can't plan all of this at once. And so, for example, if you're going to hire a consultant, you might want to have a scope of work that includes development of the H&A, getting the H&A done, and then starting work on the housing action plan. And one thing we didn't mention is we have sample scopes on our technical assistance page that could help you jumpstart that process. And of course, if you have any questions about how to do that, or maybe how other places have done that, you can always send us an email or give us a call.
Done. Thank you, Mark. Um, Mark or Kyle, do you see any other questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat. All right. All right, going once. Let's see here. Let's see if there's any other place. Great, that was that question. Thank you for that one, Kyle. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment. So if there are none, I just really want to, again, thank you all for joining us this morning. Encourage you to reach out with any questions or clarifications you might have. And Drew, I'll get back to you on your question. And then really just thank you. Thank you all for being here and for continuing to show up and to advise and guide us through this process. We can't do this work without you, and we're really grateful for all of you. So with that, thank you very much and have a great rest of your Thursday. Maybe we'll see some of you at 1.